A moment months in the making for just the fourth time in U.S. history.
The House Committee on the Judiciary is introducing 2 articles of impeachment charging the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, with committing high crimes and misdemeanors.
The first article, introduced by House Democrats, abuse of power, charging the president with dangling a White House meeting and military aid money to Ukraine in exchange for its leaders publicly announcing investigations that would benefit his re-election. The second article, obstruction of Congress, for blocking testimony from key administration officials in what Democrats describe as unprecedented, categorical, and indiscriminate defiance.
This just happened. Quietly, without a press conference or a breaking news banner, the architectural plans for the removal of the president were officially filed in the legislative record. We are looking at a moment that history will likely circle in red ink. It is not a vote that is happening today. It is not a trial that will start tomorrow. But the machinery has been built. 2 specific resolutions have been introduced and placed into the congressional system. They are not merely complaints or press releases. They are fully drafted articles of impeachment. This represents the most serious internal rupture in the government since the last transition of power. The stakes here are absolute. We are talking about a total collapse of the working relationship between the executive branch and the legislature. We are talking about a constitutional crisis that is currently dormant but fully armed. The headlines you are seeing are screaming about immediate action, but the reality is more complex and much more dangerous. This is a prepositioned political weapon designed to trigger the moment power shifts in Washington. Let me explain exactly what has been filed, why the timeline is misleading, and why the threat to the presidency is real. You have probably seen the images online. The thumbnails are everywhere. The social media threads are moving fast. People are sharing headlines claiming that Donald Trump is being impeached within hours. They are saying Article 2 has been unleashed. They are acting like the Senate trial is about to begin. I need to be very clear with you right now. That is not what is happening today. There is no emergency session of Congress taking place this afternoon. There is no vote on the schedule for tomorrow morning. The president is not going to be removed from office this week. But the reality is actually more significant than the hype. The impeachment articles are already written. They are finished. They are sitting in the official legislative files. They are ready to go. The headlines are referring to a very specific political mechanic that most people do not see.
Impeachment out of nothing. That was a perfect conversation.
The president's allies argue the Democrats' case is based on hearsay.
When you have abuse of power, which is an amorphous topic that can be anything they want it to be, there's just wafer-thin evidence for this.
Speaker Pelosi, Adam Schiff, and her counterparts have been abusing the power of impeachment because they're afraid Donald Trump will get reelected on his own.
Today's announcement sets up a House vote to impeach the president as soon as next week. And with Democrats in the majority, it's expected to pass along party lines.
The Democrats have drafted the charges. They have finalized the legal arguments. They have filed the paperwork. This is like a loaded weapon sitting on a table in an empty room. It is not firing right now because the people who want to pull the trigger do not have the keys to the room yet. But if the Democrats take back the House of Representatives in the 2026 midterms, the situation changes instantly. If that power shift happens, these articles do not need to be written from scratch. They do not need months of hearings. They do not need a long investigation. They can be picked up, dusted off, and moved to the floor for a vote. That is where the phrase "within hours" comes from. It means that a new Congress could theoretically start impeachment proceedings within hours of being sworn in. The paperwork is already done. Let's look at exactly what is in these documents. The story is not that impeachment is happening today. The story is that the blueprint is already public. There are 2 main resolutions you need to know about. The first is House Resolution 353. It was introduced back in April 2025. The title is simple and stark. It is a resolution impeaching Donald John Trump for high crimes and misdemeanors. This document contains 7 different articles of impeachment. But the one everyone is focused on right now is Article 2. In this specific document, Article 2 accuses the president of usurping the appropriations power. That sounds technical, but it is actually very simple. The Constitution says that Congress controls the money. It is called the power of the purse. The president cannot spend money unless Congress passes a law saying he can. This resolution argues that Trump is ignoring that rule. It claims he is treating the United States Treasury like a personal bank account. It accuses him of taking money from one place and moving it to another without permission. It accuses him of funding operations that Congress specifically refused to pay for. The Democrats who wrote this say this is a direct violation of the Constitution. They argue that if a president can spend money however he wants, then Congress does not matter anymore. They say this breaks the basic deal of American government. It is not just about moving numbers on a spreadsheet. It is about who has the final say on how the government uses its power. Then there is the second document. This is House Resolution 939. This one also has an Article 2, but it is about something completely different. This charge is about the courts. It is titled Abuse of Presidential Power to Intimidate Federal Judges. This is a very heavy charge. It lists specific times the president has attacked judges who ruled against him. It cites his rhetoric about radical lunatic judges. It points to the threats and harassment that follow his statements. The argument here is that the president is creating a climate of fear. The resolution claims he is trying to scare judges into ruling in his favor. It mentions that some judges have needed increased security details. It mentions death threats. It mentions a chilling effect, where the legal system stops working because the people in charge are afraid for their safety. The Democrats are putting this on the record as an impeachable offense. They are saying that attacking the referee is not just bad behavior, but a high crime. So you have two different versions of Article 2 sitting in the files. One is about money, one is about judges. Both of them are designed to remove the president from office. But right now, neither of them is moving. They are stuck in committee. They are effectively frozen because the Republicans control the House. The Republican majority is not going to vote to impeach their own party leader. That is just a fact of political math. As long as the current Congress is in session, these papers are just papers. This brings us back to the timeline. The Democratic leadership knows they do not have the votes today. They have said publicly that they are not pushing for a vote right now. They know it would fail, but they also admit that their voters are angry. There is a loud demand from their base for accountability. People want consequences. The leadership is essentially saying that they hear the anger, but they cannot act on it yet. This is why the 2026 midterms are the most important part of this story. If the House flips everything I just described, goes from being a piece of paper to being a live crisis, the new majority would walk into the building with the work already finished. They would have the charges regarding the spending power. They would have the charges regarding the judges. They would have the legal justification. All they would need is the will to vote. That is the real meaning of the headlines. It is not a prediction of what will happen this afternoon. It is a description of a trap that has been set for the future. The president is currently governing under the shadow of these documents. Every time he moves money around, the Democrats can point to House Resolution 353. Every time he criticizes a court ruling, they can point to House Resolution 939. The files are growing, the case is building. It is all happening in plain sight, but it is waiting for the trigger of an election to become real. This changes the way we have to look at the next 2 years. Usually a second term is about legacy. It is about finishing the job, but now it is also about survival. The president knows these resolutions exist. His legal team knows exactly what is in them. They know that a bad result in the midterms means an immediate pivot to defense. It means the second half of the term becomes a legal battle instead of a policy crusade. So when you hear people talking about Article 2, do not get confused by the Constitution. They are talking about the second charge in a list of charges that is already sitting in a file cabinet in Washington. It is a plan for a future conflict. It is a promise of a fight. And while nothing is happening within hours from this exact moment, the clock is ticking toward the next election where this dormant threat could suddenly wake up. We need to step back and look at why this specific situation is so dangerous for the stability of the government. This is not just another political argument. This is a structural breakdown. When we look at history, we see that the American system relies on a very delicate balance between the three branches of government. You have the Congress, the president, and the courts. They are supposed to check each other. But what we are seeing now is a preparation for total institutional warfare. The charges in these resolutions go to the very heart of that system. Let's look at the spending charge first. This is not new in American history, but it is rare to see it reach this level. We can look back to the 1970s and Richard Nixon. Nixon tried to impound funds. He tried to refuse to spend money that Congress had allocated. That fight led to the Budget Control Act of 1974. It was a massive struggle over who actually runs the country. The current charge against Trump is similar, but perhaps more aggressive. It argues that he is not just refusing to spend money, but spending it on things Congress explicitly forbade. If the president can bypass Congress on spending, the legislative branch loses its primary power. The ability to write laws means nothing if you cannot control the budget. This is why the Democrats framed this as a constitutional crisis. They are arguing that if this behavior continues, the presidency becomes a monarchy. It becomes a position with total control over the national treasury. That is a fundamental shift in how the United States operates. Then we have the charge regarding the judges. This is even more volatile. The judiciary has always been the quiet branch. It relies on the other branches to respect its rulings. It has no army. It has no police force. It only has its authority. When a president attacks the legitimacy of the courts, he is attacking the glue that holds the system together. We have seen tension between presidents and judges before. Franklin Roosevelt tried to pack the court when they blocked his agenda. But the charge here is different. It is about personal intimidation. It is about safety. This is comparable to moments in history where institutions begin to fail because the people inside them are afraid. If a judge changes a ruling because they are afraid for their family, the rule of law has ended. That is the argument the Democrats are making. They are saying this is not politics. This is the destruction of the justice system. The fact that these articles are already written and filed creates a very strange dynamic. It is like a sword of Damocles hanging over the White House. Usually, impeachment is a reaction to a sudden event. A crime is discovered, an investigation starts, and then charges are drafted. Here the process is inverted. The charges are ready. They are waiting for the political opportunity. This normalizes impeachment in a way we have not seen before. It turns impeachment into a standard tool of political opposition rather than a rare emergency brake. We also need to compare this to the previous impeachments of this president. He has been through this twice, once for Ukraine, once for January 6th. In both cases, he was acquitted by the Senate. He survived, but the context is different now. In his first term, he had the protection of a unified party and the promise of future power. In a second term, legally, he cannot run again. He is a lame duck. That changes the calculation for everyone around him. The power dynamic in Washington is shifting. The fear that usually keeps a party in line might be weaker. If the Democrats win the midterms and bring these charges, they are betting that the political gravity will have changed. They are betting that after years of conflict, the system might be ready to break against the president. This is a battle over the definition of power. Is the president the absolute leader of the executive branch, or is he a clerk who must follow the instructions of Congress? Is the president allowed to critique the courts, or does his voice carry so much weight that criticism becomes a weapon? These are the questions that these resolutions are asking. And the fact that they are written down means that sooner or later the system is going to have to answer them. Now we need to look at what is likely to happen next. We have to be realistic about the consequences of these files sitting in the record. In the short term, nothing changes on the surface. The president will continue to govern. The Congress will continue to argue. But underneath, the behavior of the administration will likely change. When a president knows that a blueprint for his removal is sitting in a drawer, every decision goes through a new filter. The administration will have to be more careful with how they move money. They will have to be more careful with legal challenges. Even if they act confident in public, the lawyers behind the scenes will be working overtime to avoid giving the Democrats more ammunition. This creates a paralyzed government. It slows everything down. Bold action becomes risky action. If we look toward the 2026 midterms, the consequences become very sharp. If the Republicans hold the House, these resolutions die. They remain historical footnotes. They will be remembered as threats that were never acted upon. The president will finish his term likely claiming victory over his opponents again. However, if the Democrats win the House, the timeline accelerates rapidly. We can predict that the pressure from the base will be immediate. The leadership will not be able to ignore the loaded gun on the table. We would likely see a move toward impeachment proceedings within the first few months of the new session. This would consume the entire political oxygen of the country. Legislation would stop. Compromise would become impossible. The country would be locked in a televised legal battle for months. The long-term consequence of this strategy is the permanent weaponization of impeachment. If this becomes the standard playbook, drafting charges and waiting for a majority, then every future president will face this threat. It will become a routine part of the transfer of power. The stability of the four-year term will be eroded. Every midterm election will become a referendum on whether to remove the president. there is also the question of the Senate. Even if the House impeaches, the Senate must convict. That requires a 2/3 vote. That is a very high bar. It is historically almost impossible to reach. But if the charges are about the fundamental powers of Congress, the money, and the courts, there is a possibility that institutional loyalty kicks in. Senators might care more about the power of the Senate than the success of the president. It is unlikely, but it is the variable that makes this dangerous for the White House. We are walking into a period of high-stakes gambling. The Democrats are betting that they can win the midterms and use these files. The president is betting that he can maintain control and ignore the threat. The only certainty is that the machinery for a constitutional crisis is fully assembled. It is oiled, it is loaded, and it is waiting for the voters to decide who gets to put their hand on the lever. The next 2 years are not just about policy. They are about the survival of the presidency as we know it.